Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown. I'm Matthew Peterson, and today we're going to talk about the roster as some moves have been made ahead of the deadline as NFL clubs had to get their rosters down to 80 players. Last week it was 85, this week it's 80. Let's check out what the calendar looks like here. 4 p.m. Eastern Time, all NFL clubs had to get their rosters down to 80 players. But next week, that's the big week. This week's still full of some notable names, but there is one notable name that we're going to talk about in a little more detail. But next week, that's the one where all the eyes are on of who's going to make that 53-man roster. That will be at the end of the month. But first, let's check out the 6 Broncos roster moves. Well, I guess 7 Broncos roster moves as they made an addition as well. And leading things off, it is Josh Watson, the linebacker, who made the Broncos 53-man roster the last 2 seasons. We'll get into him a little later. Recently signed running back Adrian Killins. He also does not make it. He was pushed on waived/injured. Brett Jones altogether was cut. And then a hometown guy that everyone was rooting for. This is the tough one out of Castle Rock, Colorado. Went to Air Force. Nolan Laufenberg, offensive guard. He does not make the roster as well. Add in rookie Brandon Mack, and then a guy who's got a tough name, but it's the last time we got to say it, Pita Taupenoa. Yep. That's how I got it. But let's talk about Josh Watson. Let's start with him here. Made the Broncos roster the previous 2 seasons. Kind of the first notable cut. Name you'll probably recognize more than others. Played in 17 games over those 2 seasons with Denver. Never made a start, always coming in. More of a special teams kind of guy. But this tough rookie class, Baron Browning, a couple other guys like Robinson, just made it too competitive at that inside linebacker spot. Remember, last season, Denver only took 5 inside linebackers, so you saw the writing on the wall a little bit. You could kind of base it off of history, and Watson, I guess his time was just done in Denver. Broncos fans, if you love the content we give you, or if you just can't wait for the regular season, because don't get me wrong, preseason's fun and all, but it's just an appetizer for what the entree is, and that is 17 weeks, or make it 18 weeks of regular season football now. So go ahead and subscribe so we can give you all that Denver Broncos content you crave. Next roster move the Broncos made was releasing Adrian Killins. Well, they placed him on injured/waived. He got banged up in that Week 2 preseason game against the Seahawks, and what a stopping that was. More like the Sea Chickens after that 4 quarters of football. One team played 4 quarters of football. The other team didn't even score a touchdown. But yeah, Killins, his time in Denver is done. He was brought in after Boone was placed on the injury list. So they wanted to add some more competition, and they are going to replace him. And we'll talk about the replacement later on, so stick around for that. Another roster move made, Brett Jones. This one a little more surprising, only because this was a guy who made some other rosters in the NFL. You look at his history, he was last with the Vikings. He started like 12 games for the New York Giants a couple seasons ago. So Brett Jones had a little more NFL experience, but this is a Broncos offensive line that's pretty loaded. So unfortunately for Jones, just not enough room for him. And now the hometown guy. This was someone everyone was pulling for out of Castle Rock, Colorado. Went to Air Force, made a bunch of all Mountain West teams, and that was Nolan Laufenberg. Unfortunately for him, it's just not, going to happen. But hey, you never know. Put some good tape on there. Other teams will pick it up and look at him. Maybe a practice squad in his future. Best of luck to Laufenberg, the Colorado native. Now, here's the fun thing about preseason football. Sure, you don't get to see the true stars like Von Miller and Bradley Chubb as much as you may like, but hey, we do get to fall in love with some roster players. So give me a name down in the comments below who your favorite roster bubble player is. Personally, right now, I think Trinity Benson is definitely the popular name, and very relieved that we did not see him in this batch of roster cuts. I didn't think we would, but he's going to at least stick around another week until maybe next week for that final roster cuts where he's going to be competing with a couple other wide receivers. Moving on to other wide receivers who did not make the roster. How about the rookie out of Temple, Brandon Mack? It's a tough class, and this is what I was talking about here. You look at the top 4 wide receivers for the Broncos, absolute locks, and then you've got guys like Deontay Spencer, Tyree Cleveland, Trinity Benson, who tossed his name in the hat. Seth Williams, what a play he had in that last Broncos game. Kendall Hinton, QB1 from last season. I can go on and on. Mac, just unfortunately, you could only have probably 7 wide receivers make it. I gave 8 names, and he was 9th or 10th on the list. It's just not going to play out for him this time in Denver. And then on to the final roster cut for the Denver Broncos. Pita Taupinua, the linebacker who had bounced around a little bit in the NFL, started with the Atlanta Falcons, last played for the San Francisco 49ers. The Utah product just entered a crowded linebacker room. They got back Von Miller, so that's going to take away someone else's roster spot. And you remember those San Francisco and Atlanta teams, they were really banged up at that linebacker position, really just defense in general, which kind of gave room for maybe someone like Pita to slip into the roster. Broncos fans, if you love making some money on your team, then go ahead to BetUS. It's a great sports book we're partnered with, and here's the deal. 2 simple steps. You go to the link below, then you use the promo code Broncos125, and what our friends at BetUS will do is they're going to tack on an additional 125% deposit bonus. Now, you don't need to get your calculator out. Let me tell you how that works. You put in $100, they're going to give you $225 altogether to play with. So go ahead and blow it maybe on the next Broncos preseason game. You know what's really popular in preseason? Unders. So maybe pay next month's mortgage. Don't quote me, but maybe the under against the Rams next week. Or I think we'll see a lot of Bridgewater and Locke and not a lot of Stafford for LA. So hey, maybe toss some money on that Broncos money line or spread. Guys, let me know, after this exciting preseason start, are you more optimistic now than you were before the preseason? Type Y for yes or type N for no. I know I'm just overreacting probably a little more than just a little bit, but hey, you haven't let a single team score a touchdown on you. They've been field goal machines. Field goals don't win football games. I know we're not going to face those second and third team defenses and offenses in the week 1 regular season against the Giants, but it's still exciting. So let me know down in the comments if you are more optimistic now than you were before. So the Broncos, they got rid of 6 players, which gave an extra roster spot, so why not make an addition? And they did that exactly. They picked up rookie Stevie Scott, the running back out of Indiana. Any Big Ten fans in the house? You working on your alliance? Well, how about you work on doing some film on Stevie Scott, because he's going to be in the Broncos training camp in preseason for at least the next week with that big roster cut coming up next Tuesday. Was pretty exciting out of IU. 10 touchdowns, average, like you see, nearly 7 yards per carry. Didn't get a full workload because the Big Ten only played not even 10 games. But check out the Broncos running back depth chart here. Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams, those two are headlining it. This is why I think they're adding more running backs. You got Boone, who's banged up. Royce Freeman, who was kind of on the outside looking in, and so we'll see how that plays out. But if anything, this is just head coach Vic Fangio and GM George Paton bringing in competition and most likely lightening the workload for Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. They don't need those guys getting banged up in practice, so why don't you bring in a different body that can take on some more of the workload? But talking about running backs, it leads me to this point here. Who do you think will have more touchdowns this season? Could it be Melvin Gordon? He had 9 last year in his first season with the Broncos. Or the rookie Javonte Williams? Hop down in the comments and let me know. Type MG for Gordon or JW for Williams.